الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. If I can first of all introduce myself, and I'll ask my colleague Brother Suleiman to introduce himself. My name is Baba Mirza. What I do in my day job, if you like, is I'm a full-time school teacher. I'm a senior leader of a state school in North London, in Tottenham. You know where all the riots took place? Right next to Tottenham football ground, at the back, is a school called Northumberland Park School. So I'm part of the senior leadership team at that school. I teach ICT, but I think nowadays my responsibility is literacy. So I make sure that children who are coming to my school, their literacy levels are up. That's become much more of my role nowadays. In addition to that, I'm the Vice Chair and Director of Education of Nida Trust. It's an educational charity. We run training, we run all sorts of different programs, but the basic point is this, that we try and help young people raise their achievement, raise their aspirations, ensure that they achieve very highly, and we do that through working with young people, working with their parents, and also working with the teachers. In addition to that as well, I do some work on Islam channel as well. Again, the work is the same. We're trying to promote education. We're trying to promote education, inshallah. I'm also a father of two, inshallah, mashallah, two daughters. And that's me, inshallah. I'll pass you on to Brother Suleiman, who can introduce himself, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum. It's lovely being here actually today, because I used to work at Woolwich Polytechnic School, as the Sheikh said, just around the corner. And I used to come here for Jummah prayer in, I think, 2005. I used to come for regular beard. But my beard wasn't quite as long then, so maybe you don't recognize me. But alhamdulillah, I've already seen one of my ex-students who I used to teach him in year 10 in English, so that was very nice. I'm also a teacher, a full-time teacher. I'm actually a deputy headmaster of an independent school over in West London now, so I've moved over to the other side. And my responsibility is also in literacy. I'm head of English of the school, and so I do a lot of trying to get the boys, it's a boys' school, trying to get the boys to read, trying to make sure that they're actually interested in reading. And so part of our presentation today is going to be looking at that, about the importance of reading, inshallah. And I am also a father. I have two daughters, and now, alhamdulillah, I've had a son about a year ago now, so I'm very pleased about that. And so I'm also, as a parent, going through a lot of those struggles that I know all parents go through, about how to direct our children down the right path with all of these distractions and everything occurring around us, how to make sure that they're going down the right path and they're spending time doing the right sorts of things. My oldest daughter is 7 years old now, so she's just getting to that age where actually she needs a lot of direction and a lot of guidance, and it is a challenge. So we'll be sharing that challenge with you today, and we'll be talking to you about some of the things that we've learned over the last few years, but also we'll also be asking for your opinions, inshallah, about some of the things perhaps that you've learned as well as parents.
I think there's two important questions you didn't answer. One is, where is that accent from? It's from Australia. He's from Australia. And so the other one is, when did you become Muslim as well? I think everybody's wondering, when did you become Muslim? Just answer that before people start thinking in the middle of the presentation. Answer that question.
I'm from Melbourne in Australia, and I moved to London in 2002 actually. And I was only here for about 6 months, and I was working in Whitechapel, very near the East London Mosque. I'm sure many of you know East London Mosque in Whitechapel. And almost every one of my pupils was Muslim. Bangladeshi, mainly Muslim, and they kept saying to me, "Oh, sir, you should come down to the mosque to see what it's like. Just read the Quran. Just do this. Just do this." And slowly but surely, they talked me into it. And I went down to the mosque, and then suddenly I read the Quran, and I talked to some brothers down there, and alhamdulillah, I decided to become a Muslim at that point. So that was October 2002.
Good, great. Okay. Now let's talk about what we've been asked to talk about, which is about your children, our children, inshallah, and talk about their education. Now, this topic is, I think there is really nothing more important than this topic. So much so that I think both of us, and I can only speak for myself really, I pretty much dedicated my life to trying to promote this very topic that we're talking about today. not just with my own children, but with other children as well, and the entire community, inshallah. There is always a context to everything, a background behind everything, and I think we need to appreciate that. Many of course, mashallah, very learned in Quran, etc., who will not be able to recite the two hadith above much better than we can, and be able to relay the understanding behind that hadith much better than we can. But I suppose it's a reminder that when we talk about education, there are many ayat of Quran, many ahadith referring to the importance of education. And the two ahadith, or the two hadith above, are just two examples. And we're talking to brothers, and of course there are some sisters as well, where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, translated meaning of course, a father gives his child nothing better than a good education. And that for me really hit me when I became a father 9 years ago, that you start to think about, even before the child is born, when the mother is pregnant, you start thinking about your responsibility as a father. All of a sudden you start reading books. I know before you get married you start reading marriage books, and but after that you start reading books and leaflets and pamphlets and going to lectures about how to become a good father. Well, I hope you do. And one of the things I came across is this very powerful hadith, that actually we can do nothing better than to give our children as fathers a good education. That is our responsibility, to give them a good education. That is what they deserve. That is their right. That is their right, to give them a good education. And the other one was really touched me as well. That when we pass away, and of course there is nothing more assured in life than the fact that we are going to pass away, that our deeds will come to an end. When a man dies, all his deeds come to an end except for three: ongoing charity, beneficial knowledge, or a righteous son who will pray for him. And I focus on the word righteous. Somebody who is Allah-fearing. We're not just talking about somebody who is walking the streets causing havoc, causing shame not only to yourself, to your family, to the community and our deen, but instead is somebody who is representing yourself, your family, the community and the ummah, and is spreading the message as they should do, and making dua for you as well. I want you to all to correct your intention. And I do this every time I deliver this presentation, which is when you go to a lecture, be it about education or marriage, or whether it's to do with any aspect of Islam, you need to correct your intention, that if you find something beneficial, then you must implement it in your life. You must have that firm intention, otherwise there is no point. And that intention needs to be that you will implement it very quickly, within 24 hours. Immediately, or within 24 hours, within 48 hours. And really, if you don't implement it within 48 hours, then really it's not going to happen. What it means is that the information went in one ear and it came out to the other. And I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that it does not happen here. We're going to mention lots of information here which I think is going to touch you. I hope it does, inshallah. We've delivered this presentation to numerous people around London, all sorts of people. And some of the information is quite touching. It really takes you back. And it starts to make you think about yourself and your children, whether you're doing enough for your children. And that's the purpose of the presentation. We want you to become uneasy, to feel uneasy, to feel a sense of, when I say being inadequate, I'm not doing enough. We should never feel as though we are doing enough. Never. As we know, the Sahaba never felt that they felt as though they were doing enough. They were constantly in the same almost anxiety, because they didn't feel as though they were doing enough. And unfortunately, I think these days, some of us are quite arrogant actually. We think we're doing enough. But in fact, I don't think we are. And we'll give you some proof behind that, inshallah, as a community. I want you to think about this question. MashaAllah, there are some children at the back, probably some children upstairs as well. And hands up if you have children. Just raise your hands, inshallah, if you have children. MashaAllah, so I think the majority of brothers here do have children. when your child was, I think one of the most happiest moments is when your child is born. One of the most happiest moments, especially the first one. You know, my wife really hates it when I say that, especially the first one. What's wrong with the second one? What's wrong with... But I think the first one is, I think, special because you have never been through that experience before. So when the baby is born, every day, every week, every moment is special. You know, when they start walking, when they start talking, when you feed them, when you go out to the park, every moment is very, very special. Whereas when the second and third one come, you think, oh, I've done that before. You become much more experienced. But during that time of 9 months, when your wife is going through a lot of, let's say, pressure, very difficult period for the woman, you start thinking about what it is that you want your child to become. And so what I want you to think about is, what would make you really, really happy in terms of your child achieving something in life? What is the single most, and it might be lots of things. It might be to get good GCSEs, get a degree, maybe memorize Quran, become a khatib, travel abroad and seek knowledge, open a school, etc., etc. Get married. There are lots and lots of things, but I want you to think about what would be the number one thing that beats everything. If your child achieved that one, this is the one thing I want my child to achieve. I want you to think about that now. Now, that one thing that you want your child to achieve, and it might be different, and normally we do this as a workshop setting, and it is different. Sometimes one person says, I want them to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to feel a closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that encompasses everything. Another person said, I want them to become a doctor, you know, fine, okay. But whatever it may be, whether it's become a doctor, whether it's become a sheikh, it requires work. These things do not happen overnight. And that is the basis of what we're saying here today, is everything requires planning, preparation. And it really troubles me, nowadays, we might spend months planning a holiday somewhere, spend months buying one of these in our houses, looking at different websites, comparing, etc. We might spend months trying to buy a car, looking at the best models, etc. But we spend almost no time planning, preparing for our children's education. You know, and it does trouble me. Okay, this question here is a bit of a loaded question. You might think, hang on a minute, what do you mean our Muslim children are failing at school? When we talk about Muslim in this community within the UK, we talk about 5 groups. We talk about, and by the way, before I mention any groups, I have no intention of offending anyone if I mention any particular culture. Okay, we are quite mixed. I'm from Pakistani background. My wife is Turkish. He's an Aussie. You know, he's married into a Bengali family. So, mashallah, the Muslim community is mixed. But I want to say now, I'm not trying to offend anybody by mentioning particular ethnic groups. The groupings are the Pakistani community, the Bengali community, the Somali community, the Turkish community, and the Arab community. Those 5 communities are the majority communities within the UK, and the largest communities, and they make up the 2 or 3 million Muslims that are within the UK. And if we look at the statistics, this is what comes up. They are not doing very well in school, and that's fact. That's fact. And we look at some of the statistics in a bit more detail, inshallah. I think you need to have an awareness about education in this country, and that's partly the problem. That many of us, do not have an understanding about the education in this country. So we're going to brush through and explain to you what education is like in this country. So around the country, there are 9 educational regions altogether. There are 150 local authorities. So just like Greenwich, there are another 149. There are over 24,000 schools. The majority are primary schools, I think 17,000 or 18,000. And the remaining sort of 6,000, 7,000 are secondary schools across the country. That's a big figure, isn't it? And as you can see, there are different types of schools. And we'll talk about the different types of schools later on. In those schools, there are 8 million pupils. 8 million pupils in these schools. Now, the government splits up or groups people according to their income. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but the government groups people according to their income. Low income, middle income, high income. And as you can see here, according to the government, this is how they decide whether a family is low income, so £5,500, middle income about 30,000, and high income is, very high, sort of £80,000 plus. That's how they decide whether you are in low income, middle income, or high income. Now, when we look at the low income, 15,500, I think the poverty line is around about £15,000 a year. And what the government has, for the family, of course, gosh, imagine per person. There are 11.5 million people living within the poverty line in this country. 11.5 million, meaning low income. Now you might say, £15,500, that's a lot of money. Fine, I don't disagree, but the government is saying, in terms of below the poverty line, £15,500, 11.5 million people in this country. We know there are about 65 million people in this country. Britain is supposed to be a rich country, but 11.5 million people are living within the poverty line in this country. How many Muslims? 2/3 of Muslim children in the UK live below the poverty line, 2/3. And you will see this when you go to the different communities, the deprivation. The south of England has got it better than the north. If you go to the north, you'll see the type of poverty that I'm referring to. It's almost like you'll go back home. Some of the scenes that you see. It's almost, if you take a picture there, you'll think, oh, this is back home somewhere. But it's not. It's actually in England. Yeah. Again, I'm not saying that money is a measure of success. Okay. I need to mention that. Okay. Now, let us look at the high income, middle income, and low income. See how they perform in school, according to research. Now, when I say preschool, I mean before 5 years old. Before 5 years old. Look at this. This is children read to daily at the age of 3. So they don't read, but somebody else, maybe a parent, reads to them every single day. Look at the difference. High income and low income. High income families, most of them read to their children even at the age of 3 years old. They read. Even though the child can't read, they read to them 78%. Low income families, 45%. Big difference. Why? Because the low income families feel, actually it's not important. The child can't read, why are you going to read to the child? It seems silly to them. Take him to the library once a month. Once a month, at the age of 3. Again, look, 45% high income, 24% low income. Libraries are free. Yes? Libraries are free, so you don't need to pay. Still, the low income families don't value the libraries as much as maybe the high income families. Okay? Now, when I say play on console, I don't mean pop concert, rock concert, anything, type of presentation. It could even be coming to the masjid, listen to a talk, possibly presentation. But again, you will find that the high income families think it's more it's a valuable thing to do, to take the child out and to let them watch something. Low income family, and sometimes it's free. If you go to the library, you will see so many facilities and services that are free. But if you don't go to the library, you will never see it. That's the problem. If you never go to the library, you will never be able to see the free